Well, this is really the UK making it official that they're not going to extend. They've been saying that for some time, but the Commission said that it considers this communication from the UK at this meeting of the Joint Committee today to be the final word on the matter. But just because the Commission says that doesn't mean that the EU prime ministers are going to accept that it's the final word. They're going to have a video conference with Boris Johnson on Monday at which they're expected to really impress upon him that it's very unlikely that they're going to be able to reach an agreement on a free trade deal by October, when it would need to be done by, and that basically his decision not to extend right now makes it very likely we're going to have a really disruptive no deal Brexit at the end of the year. Now, just as a reminder, the UK may have technically left the European Union at the end of January, but right now we're in this transition period in which the UK has access to the EU single market, and in exchange it has to follow all EU law. Basically, it's an EU member state in all but name at the moment, a bit similar to the situation of Norway and Switzerland. When the coronavirus broke out, it was thought that the UK would request to extend, not least because these negotiations for the FTA haven't been able to take place in person. And as you say, they've really gone nowhere. But interestingly, when the UK put out its statement saying that it was making it official today, it also outlined a plan for making its borders with the EU hard borders, imposing paperwork requirements and tariff duties at those borders. And while that might seem like a chest-thumping gesture to say, we're really ready to do this, so you'd better give us a free trade deal, actually, it shows some real nervousness in the UK, because what they've done is delayed the imposition of those hard border requirements for 6 months. Under this schedule, agricultural imports would have to start filing paperwork and paying duties in April 2021, and the rest of imports would have to start doing that in July 2021. British businesses were really demanding this, saying, look, we're dealing with coronavirus right now. We can't also be preparing for a sudden disruption at the end of the year. The problem is there's no plans to do that on the EU side. The expectation is that exports from the UK to the EU will have to start filling out paperwork and paying tariffs on January 1st. So that help may not be all that helpful.
And Dave, what kind of an impact will this have on the Northern Irish border?
Yeah, when we hear that term hard border, we've usually heard it referred to on the island of Ireland. That is, fears that making that a hard border between Northern Ireland, part of the UK, and the Republic of Ireland, part of the EU, would lead to a return to violence there. The UK was very careful in its statement to say that these new border restrictions only apply to trade between the UK and the EU, and it wouldn't apply to the land border on the island of Ireland, because the terms of the withdrawal agreement that Boris Johnson agreed with the EU pretty much hand over Northern Ireland to an EU trade area. So the hard border for trade would actually be in the Irish Sea, not on the island of Ireland. But that means that this border regime that they're outlining would also apply not just between the EU and Great Britain, that is England, Scotland, and Wales. It would also apply within the UK between Northern Ireland and the rest of the country, and that's going to be very, very tricky. Even if they are delaying the imposition of these requirements, they are going to be very, very disruptive, and businesses are incredibly worried about this. The fear is that just when Europe is recovering economically from the damage of the coronavirus, it will have to deal with a brand new crisis, which will hurt both the EU and the UK if all of a sudden, overnight, what was formerly a free trade area suddenly sees a very hard imposition of paperwork and tariffs. The UK, in this statement, they say the tariffs will take effect unless some other agreement has been reached. They're really hoping that these FTA talks will make the EU drop its demand for a level playing field. The EU would drop its demand for the UK to align its rules with EU rules in order to get an FTA, and that they will have some kind of free trade agreement that would have no tariffs. But on the EU side, it's really seen as unlikely that the EU would ever drop that. So we do seem to be heading toward a pretty disruptive hard Brexit at the end of the year.
Potentially a plethora of challenges there. Dave Keating, thank you so much, reporting from Brussels.